So he was getting very frustrated. His main abiding aim was to do a dramatization of the story of Emmett Till. I don't know if you know who that is. He was an African-American teenager who was hung for whistling at a white woman. And that was a major story in the late 50s. And an executive had the gall to tell him that you can do the story, but you have to make him a Mexican. And he was outraged. And that was the final straw for Rod. So at that time, live television was starting to disappear. People were moving west to California to film things on film. So that's when he started to sell some shows to television here in the West Coast. And he wrote a 1-hour drama called The Time Element. I don't know if you know about this. Time Element was a 1-hour drama for Westinghouse Desilu Playhouse, which was one of those dramatic anthology series. William Bendix, who was known for many years as from the life of Riley, who was a comic actor, plays a New York bartender who goes to bed every night and dreams he's at Pearl Harbor on the 6th of December. And he can't convince anybody that there's going to be an attack tomorrow. So he was very frustrated. He went to a therapist, and it was a very cool story, kind of a time travel story, and nobody had ever really done a time travel story on dramatic television. So Rod sold that, and they got so many letters and so much activity on this one show, it encouraged Rod to pitch the idea of the Twilight Zone to CBS. And because there was so much popularity for that show, which was very Twilight Zone-esque, they were able to sell it. And there were some interesting things with the deal. He got probably arguably one of the best deals ever given to a writer in Hollywood history. Total creative control. If he wanted to do a story on the Holocaust, he would do it. If he wanted to do a story on child endangerment, he would do it. If he wanted to do a story about racism, but he would disguise the controversy into the science fiction milieu. The episode Eye of the Beholder, which is the great episode with the pig faces, that's a definite story about racism, as kind of hidden in a science fiction story. So that's an example of how he was able to tell his stories without the interference. Even though he had that contract, he might have gotten some flack from doing too much controversy. And then he really wanted to hire Ray Bradbury to be one of his team. And CBS was adamant that he write as many of the stories as he could himself because they were paying him a good price. So unfortunately, Ray Bradbury only did the one story. Let's see if I remember the name of it. I'll remember it in a second. And then he brought in 3 writers who are wonderful writers: Charles Beaumont, Richard Matheson, and George Clayton Johnson. And Richard Matheson had just had a very successful movie in Hollywood called The Incredible Shrinking Man, which was a big success. And then he was known for all of his great science fiction and horror stories. They all brought something interesting to the mix, but the one problem was that Rod Serling, in writing 92 of 156 episodes, was exhausted after the 5th season. So even though there was kind of a feeling it had run its course, I think if he hadn't written as many episodes, he probably would have continued it. The other problem was that James Aubrey, who ran the network programming, did not like anthology. He felt that television was all about bringing continuing characters to the table, and viewers would watch the same people each week and get really into the story. So when Twilight Zone was canceled, he made the Beverly Hillbillies, he made Gilligan's Island, he made all those fun, goofy shows, and that's what he felt television was about. So unfortunately, he and Rod did not get along too well. So the show went on the air in '59 and was not a huge ratings hit, unfortunately. Shows at that time that were more popular were shows like The Untouchables and 77 Sunset Strip Gunsmoke. Perhaps the anthology was dying at the time because you couldn't promote it like you could promote a regular series by putting the faces of those characters on billboards, because the faces on Twilight Zone changed every week, which I think is one of the great things about an anthology is you get a fresh new story every week, which is just so popular. So that kind of hurt the ratings. Although Eye of the Beholder, the one we were talking about, did very well. It was one show that got a lot of attention. The show became particularly popular for college students who were kind of doing what they do today, the water cooler talk about that. And young people. I personally, the first time I ever watched a Twilight Zone episode, I wandered into the living room at night. Now, generally I was 8. I watched cartoons on Saturdays or during the day. I didn't watch late night dramatic television. And what I found was an episode called The Silence. Do you know that one?
Yeah, where he cuts his tongue out? Yeah.
Well, vocal cords.
Yeah.
Vocal cords. It's basically about a guy who's a motor mouth, and they're in a private club, and the guy bets him $500,000 that he can't shut up for a year. So they put him in a glass booth in the basement, and they actually monitor him 24 hours a day to make sure he doesn't talk. And then, of course, at the end, what's happening is the guy who bet him $500,000 goes bankrupt and can't pay him. So he eventually comes out and he snipped his vocal cords. It's one of those O. Henry type twists. So that was a great episode. But I enjoyed it, but I wasn't a regular watcher that young. It was much older kids really got into it. But I certainly got interested in later, and I think that one of the things you can say about the Twilight Zone is it influenced filmmakers in every genre for the next 60 years. I mean, just recently, shows like Get Out, the Jordan Peele movie, and Woody Allen's Midnight in Paris, they all seem to have a Twilight Zone motif about it. Television shows like Stranger Things, that's very influenced by the Twilight Zone. So all these years later, I think the Twilight Zone is more popular than ever. And that's part of the reason I wrote the book. And I was very fortunate for J.J. Abrams. He actually gave me a nice quote. He said, "An incredible treasure trove of details and crucial information you never knew you needed. The Twilight Zone Encyclopedia is lovingly researched, written, and presented." That was kind of nice to hear. So do you have any questions?
Do you have a favorite episode?
I have like my top 5.
Yeah.
I would say that the Henry Bemis episode with the glasses, Time Enough at Last, is just one of those poignant episodes. The 2 I mentioned, Walking Distance and Stop at Willoughby, are also 2 of my favorites. I like William Shatner looking out the window of his airplane, A Nightmare at 20,000 Feet. Also, the other Shatner episode, the one where he's playing with the fortune-telling machine, is very cool. And then a few years ago, as just a kind of a lark, I felt like I wanted to direct something. A friend of mine had developed a friendship with the Marine Corps Liaison Office in LA, and we got them to cooperate with doing a remake of The Seventh is Made Up of Phantoms. So we went out to Camp Pendleton in San Diego, and they gave us these big armored vehicles, and we remade that episode. One of my co-stars was Michael Cole, who was on the Mod Squad a million years ago. So that's one of my favorites too. And then you should note that I do a blog every day on Facebook. It's called the Twilight Zone Encyclopedia. So I do This Day in Twilight Zone History. Like today is December 9th. What are we talking about today? We're toasting the 1960 premiere of The Trouble with Templeton, which is a good episode. So that's definitely one of my favorites as well. So I'm going to move to the table over there, and I'll sign your book over there. But you don't have to buy one, because I'm going to give you this one because you showed up.
Yeah, it turned out for you, Amelia. Good.
I'll sign it right here. Actually,